Right, hello everyone. This is my video where I'm basically just going to go through, effectively trying to work out who might win this year's World Darts Championships. I'm going to basically go through all of the different quarters of the draw. I'm going to basically be looking at. It'll be mainly focused on the favourites or the supposed favourites to win this tournament and what kind of run they might have to maybe becoming world champion on the 3rd of January in 2025. But yeah, I thought let's just do a video. Let's go through the different quarters. Let's just see what could potentially happen. Have a talk through some of the first round games as well, because I think this year in particular, it feels like the strength and depth of the tournament is never been greater. There's arguments to say that maybe at the very top of darts there might be only maybe one, two, possibly three that are probably capable of actually winning at the moment and stand above the rest. But in terms of like what could happen in the lead up to getting to maybe the deep end of the tournament, I think there could be some potential upsets, and there's some big names in that first round draw. I mean, I was just looking through a list that I've just got to my right here, and you've got like, I'm going to reel them off. You've got the likes of Jermaine Watamina, who just got to a final of a European Championship, a major tournament on TV. Alan Suter, a player that's played many tournaments now in the PDC World Championships, gone deep as well. Fallon Sherrock, Ryan Joyce, probably one of the most underrated players. He's not seeded. Petrescu, another player, is going to be a danger, I think, in this tournament. Scott Williams, semi-finalist of this competition. Cameron Mendes, Martin Lukeman got to the final of the Grand Slam recently. Kevin Dotes, Mickey Mansell, another player that's had a major 2024. Neiman, who I think quite a few are expecting to do quite well in this tournament. Landman, Callan Ritz. These are names that I would maybe expect to be seeded potentially, but that just shows you that there's probably a good 16 players outside of the top 32 that are good enough to probably be in the top 32 at some point or have been in the past. So it's going to be, I think it's going to be a really exciting and interesting tournament. I think there could be potentially a few upsets early doors, but maybe we might start to see the norm kind of creeping. I think the cream always rises to the top is the same, right? And I think that could probably happen in this tournament. But let's get on with it, basically. So let's go into quarter one and quarter two, because I think it's interesting to just mention that both Luke Humphries and Luke Littler are on the same side of the draw, just how the seedings have gone. So that means they won't face each other in the final, but they could potentially face each other in the semi-final, which gives a great opportunity for someone else, maybe on the other side of the draw. The likes of Gary Anderson, Michael Smith, Michael Van Gerwen are all on that other side of the draw, and we'll talk about them in more detail later. But yes, let's start off with quarter one, where this is Luke Humphries' side of the draw. And I think he's got a relatively straightforward run into the quarterfinals, if I'm honest. He will face the winner of Thibaut Tricole or Joe Comito. I don't know too much about Comito, but Tricole I've seen a little bit about. He obviously broke through in the World Darts Championships last year. He also got a good result released recently against Gerwyn Price in the Players' Championship final, beating him in the first round as well. So there's a guy that's got a little bit more confidence on the big stage, and he's a player that I think could be a danger to most, but I don't think he'd be a threat to Luke Humphries. I think Luke will have the better of him. And the one thing I saw with Tricole in the game that I saw against Gerwyn Price last month is that Tricole almost lost his bottle against him. He got straight ahead of him and then struggled to get over the finish line. He did eventually, which was great for him, but he let Gerwyn Price back in big time. And you do wonder with Luke Humphries, I don't think them opportunities are going to happen again soon. So I think Luke will get through his second round game against either of them two. And then he'll probably face, likely will be Raymond van Barneveld in the third round. You've got Nick Kenny and Stowe Bunce as well that will obviously take on Raymond, or one of them will take on Raymond in that second round. But I still think Raymond van Barneveld is probably going to be the likely player that Luke plays in the third round. And I think he will win now. I don't think that's going to be too much of a. It'll be a good game. I think it'll draw a lot of attention, the match, because obviously it's two world champion or past world champions going at it with each other. But I think Luke's game is probably in a far better place than maybe Raymond's is at the moment. And then to win, I suppose, to get to sort of win the sort of fourth round match, or his fourth round match will be a matchup between one of potentially James Wade, Peter Wright, Jermaine Waterman. There's also the likes of Stefan Belmont, Wesley Placia, Rice Azamoto. I mean, I don't know too much about Azamoto or Belmont to that matter, but Waterman has been very good this year. I think he's starting to show that he's showing his promise. He's always looked a good player, but he's been dubbed as a bit of a bottle job in darts, I think, in the past. But he's shown that he's got a bit about him, and he obviously got to a European Championship final as well. So he's full of confidence, and he could be the one that maybe Luke plays. James Wade, I think you can never rule him out potentially as well. I think he's always going to be a solid player, but it depends on what James Wade turns up, and he'll even admit that himself. And then you've got Peter Wright, who's probably bang out of form at the moment, and I think the best darts of Peter Wright are probably a bit behind him now. So it's probably going to be one of Waterman or probably James Wade, I think, that Luke gets. And you'd imagine he's going to win that fourth round match against whoever he's going to play in that part of the draw. And then that kind of gets him into the quarterfinals, where it gets a little bit more tasty and a little bit more challenging, I suppose, where you've got the likes of Stephen Bunting there, you've got Dirk van Dijvenbode, you've got Damon Heta, you've got Mike De Decker in there as well as your main seeded players. But you've also got a few players that have got capability, I suppose, like Luke Woodhouse, Connor Scott, Alan Suter, Madas Razmar. It's going to be an interesting sort of part of the draw, I suppose, about who can get themselves through into that quarterfinal. If I was to probably hazard a guess, I think Mike De Decker's probably the one to beat at the moment. He's been fantastic. He won the Grand Prix earlier this year. He's probably playing the best darts of his life, and I think he'll be the one that I think will probably likely take on will take on Luke Humphries in that quarterfinal. You obviously got the likes of Stephen Bunting and Dirk van Dijvenbode, who are also very good players in their own right, and of course Damon Heta. But I think if Humphries was to play one of Bunting, Dijvenbode or Heta, I think he probably wins. I think De Decker's the one who's going to be the likely one to give him a closer game, but I'm still going to give Luke Humphries the edge there. So I think Luke Humphries wins that quarter, and I think it will be against. I think likeliness is it's going to be against maybe Mike De Decker. I think in that quarterfinal, but as I say, you wouldn't be surprised if Stephen Bunting or Dirk van Dijvenbode or even Damon Heta could get there as well. But ultimately, I think the proof in the pudding is that I think it will be Mike De Decker that will play Luke Humphries, and I think Luke Humphries will come up on top against De Decker or any of them other players that I've listed off. I think he's going to be the winner of quarter one. Right, let's crack on with quarter two. And this is the Luke Littler quarter. Now, Luke Littler's got a tasty potential second round game between maybe Fallon Sherrock or Ryan Meikle. I think obviously the world of darts would be more excited about the prospect of Fallon Sherrock playing Luke Littler than maybe Ryan Meikle, but I'm not quite convinced it's going to happen like that. I think Ryan will get through Fallon potentially. I think we shall see, but needless to say, I think if he does play Fallon Sherrock in that first, there's going to be a test there for him in, I suppose, how he handles the crowd, because I'm not sure if the fans will be behind him or behind Fallon more if that does happen. History tells me that Fallon Sherrock's going to probably get more of the support potentially, but who knows? Luke Littler's such a popular darts player now, and he's only 17. He's got his own handicap in age, I suppose, in that game to kind of get over. But I think that will be a very interesting second round game if it appears that way. But I think he'll deep down want to get Ryan Meikle on the basis that he knows he'll have the crowd on his side to beat Ryan, and it will kind of get him going, I think, in the tournament. And I think he probably will beat Ryan. But Ryan is a good player. He'll be an awkward customer as well. He's quite a slow, methodical type player I don't think Littler probably enjoys playing against as much as maybe someone who's got a bit more speed and rhythm to him. But you expect Luke was going to get through that. If he does, which we expect he will, he will probably play. Well, he will play one of Ian White, Sandro Sosin, or Richie Edhouse. Now, Richie Edhouse has had a great year this year. He's won a European Championships, in fact, so he's won a major tournament. He's in great confidence, and I think Ian White, we just started to see signs that maybe his game might be coming back to a little bit of life as well. But that said, I expect Edhouse to maybe get the job done. That said, I don't think Edhouse has got enough to beat maybe Luke Littler at this level of tournament. And I think Littler will get through that game as well. So that will bring him into the fourth round, and he will play one of Danny Noppert, Ryan Searle. He could also potentially play one of Mensah Sudovic, Matt Campbell, Ryan Joyce, or Darius Labanowski. Now, when you really look at that, when I've read that off, that's actually a really strong section of the draw, because the two first round games, you've got Joyce versus Labanowski. I mean, Joyce is a terrific player. Like, the fact that he's not seeded still baffles me. Like, he's such a class player. He's world class on his day, and I think he comes across a bit of an unlucky loser to me. He always seems to play really well in games, and just gets pipped. And I was against Labanowski, so he's no mug himself. He's had a 9 darter at this tournament in the past as well, and he's a real tough cookie to beat. And then you've got Sudovic and Matt Campbell. Now, Matt Campbell had a nice little run in the tournament last year, so he's going to have confidence coming back to a stage that he's done well in 12 months ago against Sudovic, who, look, we know Sudovic. Sudovic is a player that was a former Premier League player. He was a player that's been near the top of World Darts in years gone by. He's obviously not playing his best darts now. That's why, because he's dropped out of the World 32, or the top World 32, but he's still a tricky customer. And then you add Danny Noppert and Ryan Searle to the mix. I think that could be a really, really open part of the draw, and I think it'd be very, very interesting to see what goes on there. That said, I would have to fancy Ryan Searle to still be the one that's going to get through that group of players. I'll be honest with you, I've got a sneaky feeling Ryan Joyce wins his first round, and I think he beats Danny Noppert in the second round. And I think it'll be the two Ryans that play each other in the third round and battle it out to then take on Luke Littler. Now, this is probably where I think Luke's going to get his first toughest test, maybe if he plays Ryan Searle. I think he beats Joyce. I don't know. It's a tough one. It's a really tough one. Look, let's be straight up and honest with each other. I think Luke Littler's got nothing to fear there, I suppose, in his eyes. I think he'll be quite happy with that part of the draw. I think where it starts getting a little bit more complicated, but it's bound to, is when if he gets, well, looking at this, he should get to the quarterfinal, right? And I think that's where it starts getting a little bit more interesting, because on the bottom part of his quarter, you've got the likes of Rob Cross, you've got Gian Van Veen, you've got Nathan Aspinall, you've got Andrew Gilding, you've got Grand Slam finalist Martin Lukeman, who he destroyed in that final as well. You've got Cameron Menzies in there, you've got Ricardo Petrescu, you've got semi-finalist last year Scott Williams. I think there is loads of potential in that part of that quarter as well. I mean, Scott Williams could take on Rob Cross. They play with each other pretty much on a daily basis, practicing one another. I think they're under the same management and they do a lot of practicing together. So, likeness, they will play against one another, and that could be an absolute cracker of a second round game. You've got Petrescu, I think, will win his first round game, and he will take on Van Veen. Van Veen could be anything he wants to be as well. He could be a real danger in this tournament. And then you've got like Menzies, Lukeman, Aspinall, Gilding, all good players. I think they could all beat one another in that area as well. But I think if you're going to look at who I think Littler will take on in the quarterfinals, I think it'll be Gian Van Veen. It's my gut feeling. I think this kid is going to really show himself. He disappointed himself, I believe, last year. If I remember right, I always try and remember what happened last year, and I should have notes about this, to be quite frank. In fact, I'll tell you what, we'll have a quick look. I'm pretty sure Van Veen lost his first round game, and he was definitely a favourite to win the tournament. Not win the tournament, sorry. Win that game, and I think he let himself down in that game, just didn't turn up. Let me just check. I should know this, shouldn't I? If I'm going to do something like this, I should bloody know. Yeah, he lost in the first round against Manlock Lund, who was a massive surprise, actually. God, of course, I remember it now. But I think Van Veen's the one that could be interesting in that part of the draw, I think. Rob Cross is obviously going to be he's the seeded player that's going to have the most respect, but I think he could have a tough game against Scott Williams, and you just never know in that game in particular. But if he does get through it, I think he's got a tough game against Van Veen. He's got a really horrible draw, Rob Cross, when you really look at it, because he's effectively, he will play Scott Williams, then he could play Van Veen, likely, and then he will play Luke Littler. So if Rob Cross is going to win this World Darts Championship, he's going to go through the old way, because then he'll probably have to play Luke Humphries, and then he'll probably have to play, who knows, Gary Anderson, Michael Smith, Michael Van Gerwen, whoever. We'll get into that later. But Rob Cross, looking at it on the surface, he's had an absolute pig of a draw here. But yeah, I think it'll be Van Veen versus Littler, and then that could be a real cracker. That would be so good. I think as a quarterfinal game, I think it'll be closer than most will probably think now. But I think if Van Veen gets the confidence and plays his way into the tournament, he might fancy his chances against Littler. So, on reflection, I still got to fancy Luke Humphries to win quarter one, and I still think Luke Littler's the likely winner of quarter two. But I think, if you're asking me, I think Littler's got that slightly trickier hurdle. I think potentially, or a couple of things a little bit more trickier for me to get to that semi-final than I think maybe Luke Humphries. I think Humphries has got a much nicer draw. I think his first real proper challenge will come maybe in the quarterfinals, where I think it'll be Mike De Decker. But if it isn't, I fancy him even more confident against maybe one of the other players it could be. Whereas Littler, yes, I think he'll get to the fourth round easily. I think he'll beat these guys, but I think Van Veen could be the player that really potentially pushes him. Or if Rob Cross is starting to hit some form, he will be a really tough player to beat for Littler as well. But I'm going to go with Littler for quarter two and to join Humphries in the semi-final of quarter one. And I'll go into maybe who I think might win that in a little bit later. Right, quarter three. And this is the quarter that features former world champion Michael Smith and also another former world champion in Gerwyn Price. Now, I obviously looked at the other quarters in more of a heavy Luke Humphries, Luke Littler kind of lens, and I think this quarter feels the most open when looking at it right now in front of my screen. I think quarter three looks like the one that I think is going to pose a bit more challenging, I suppose, in terms of who could get through it, or maybe quarter four might. I don't know, but let's have a look at quarter three. Let's just run through the list of players that are in that quarter. So the seeded players you've got are Michael Smith, you've got Christopher Tysky, you have got Chris Dobie, Josh Rock, Johnny Clayton, Daryl Gurney, Gerwyn Price, and Joe Cullen. Other sort of names to mention in the first, so players that are playing in the first round, you've got the likes of Kim Hybricks, who former quarterfinalist here back in 2012. You've got the dangerous Wessel Nyman, who I think people are fancying to go deep in this tournament with the draw that he's got currently at the moment. You've got people like Richard Vinstra, Kevin Dotes, Mickey Mansell, who's been brilliant this year as well, Florian Hempel, Jeffrey Design. I think there's a few maybe some dangerous first round opponents for maybe some of these seeds coming into it. But let's break it into the top bracket of this quarter, where you've got Michael Smith in the second round will take on one of Kevin Dotes or Noah Lynn Van Leuven. I think that there's a potential upset that could happen there for Michael, but I've got a feeling he will get through that somewhere. I think he'll probably play Kevin Dotes, and I think Michael will beat Kevin Dotes in that second round game, but I think Kevin will fancy his chances. Actually, if memory serves me right, did these two not play each other last year in the second round? And I think Kevin gave Michael a bit of a fright, if I remember rightly. I think he did. So this could be a big rematch here. Could be a good game. That could be a good game. I think it'll be Dotes versus Smith, but I still think Smith again will come on top. Now Smith's not probably had one of the better years that he would expect, but I look at this draw for him and I just think he's got potential to grow into this tournament and get some confidence and potentially go quite deep. And let's go into that now, because if he does win his second round game, which I think could be realistic, he then takes on one of Christoph Ratajski, Richard Vinstra, or Alexis Toilo. I don't know too much about. I know a bit about Vinstra, obviously, and Ratajski. But Smith won't look at that. Smith will look at that and go, that's not a bad opponent for me, or potential opponents to me take on in the third round. I would fancy Michael to beat Ratajski or Vinstra or Toyo in the third round, which means he will take on one of Chris Dobie, Josh Rock, Stephen Burton, Alexander Merckx, Carol Sedlec, or Reese Griffin. I think it will be Rock versus Dobie in that third round. I think that will be an absolute belter of a match as well. And they obviously take on Michael Smith. And I think Michael will probably look at it and go, I've got a chance against him too. But it will come down to who can play the best of the day, because I think all three of them at their best are absolutely electric to watch. And I think you could see plenty of 180s in them games as well. But I think there's an opportunity for Smith, and there's certainly an opportunity for Dobie and Rock to kind of get themselves into that quarter-final position, where on the bottom half of their quarter, there is Johnny Clayton, there's Daryl Gurney, there's Gerwyn Price and Joe Cullen. Now, you look at them four seeded players and you probably think, are any of them actually in any decent form? Or have they been in form for any decent form for a period of time? And the answer is probably no. I think they haven't. And this is probably why Wessel Neiman has been backed off the boards to kind of potentially win not just these matches, but win this quarter. I'm still not totally convinced. I think, look, he didn't win a game in the Grand Slam of darts, and I think you might think that's an unfair assessment just to look at 3 games, but you're on the big stage there, and he didn't perform in that area. And I think Neiman is a good player, and I think he could cause upsets, but I've just got a feeling that one of these bigger names that's kind of just been sleeping a little bit, maybe in the world of darts this year, might just wake up a bit in this tournament. So and when I say that, the likes of Michael Smith or Chris Dobie, or even potentially a Gerwyn Price or Johnny Clayton, I think one of them has got a real opportunity. I think Joe Cullen, on the other hand, might think I could have had better second round opponents than potentially Neiman. He will come through his game, you would imagine, against Cameron Carolison from South Africa. But yeah, I think you look at that side of the draw. Yeah, as I said, Marcus, I think there's a big name player in there that's going to wake up and maybe potentially just find themselves in a semi-final. Or you're going to find someone completely off the cuff that comes through. Maybe a Hempel, maybe a Deswan. I mean, Deswan's got to the last 16 before. So he's got pedigree of going deep in this competition himself. Mickey Mansell has been brilliant this year. He will look at this draw and go, do you know what? I'm playing well this year. I've got a real chance of going deep in this tournament, maybe get to a semi-final. It's a real tough one to call. But if I was to stick my neck out and who I think is going to win this court, I keep looking at the name Michael Smith. I just got a feeling he's going to find some form in this tournament. I think he's got potentially the right opponents to warm into. I think he's going to have a challenging second round game against potentially Kevin Dotes, and I think, or maybe even Noah Lynn Van Leuven. Right? I think he could. That's going to be a challenge, but I think it's one he'll get through. And then I think he will beat the likes of Ratajski in a third round game, and then it kind of sets him up against maybe a Dobie or Rock, who might just knock several shades of shit out of one another in that third round game. You just don't know. It might just take a bit out of them potentially. But I think Smith's got to look at this as a potential opportunity. And I also think Gerwyn Price has got to be thinking, look, if I'm going to make a somewhat of a comeback, it's not even a comeback, can I be recognised as a player that's going to be at the front of people's minds about winning tournaments? Because at the moment he's not. He used to be, not that long ago, even for that fact as well. But he's not for this tournament. But people might, I think he's got a kind draw. I think he could have a hostile game potentially against Kim Ibricks if Kim beats King Barry. That could be quite hostile, could be quite interesting. But I think Price will think I can take a few of these players on himself. So I think it'll be Price versus Smith, is my guess in the quarterfinals. And then I'm going to give it to Michael Smith, I think, to reach the semi-final. But I tell you what, you can make cases for a load of them, couldn't you? You really could. And all of them will be looking at that part of the draw and thinking there's an opportunity for me. And I think Michael Smith in particular will be thinking there's a big opportunity for me. If I'm playing at my best, I'm better than all of these. It's kind of the mindset I would imagine that Michael Smith will have in this quarter. So I'm going to go Michael Smith to win quarter 3. But as you can see, it's an hard one to call. Now we're on to quarter 4. And this quarter's got some massive names in it as well. It's got the likes of Michael van Gerwen. We've got Brendan Dolan. We've got Gary Anderson. We've got Ross Smith. We've got Dave Chisnell, Gabriel Clements, Dimitri Vandenberg, and we've got Martin Schindler as your seeded players in this quarter of the draw. In terms of the first round unseeded players, you've got the likes of Chris Landman, Jeffrey de Graaf, Jim Williams, who's gone deep in this competition before in the past, Ricky Evans, who's a massive character always in this tournament and got such ability and so much, I think, so much more to maybe give in this game than he probably has. Neil Zonneveld, another dangerous player. William O'Connor, again, a solid player that's always done pretty well in the early rounds of this tournament. And you've got Callum Reds, who was a talent I think most expected to maybe kick on a bit more than he has, but he's had a bit of a tough sort of year or two and hasn't quite maybe lived up to the promise that maybe some expect. But some big names in there, and the ones who are obviously going to stand out the most are, it's going to be Michael van Gerwen and maybe Gary Anderson, and they are in the same little kind of section of their quarter. Michael van Gerwen, he will play the winner of James Hurrell or Jim Long. I think that's a real tough one to call of who's going to win that one. My gut feeling reckons it would be James Hurrell, but Jim's a terrific player as well from Canada. And depending on how confident and how good Michael van Gerwen is feeling will depend on how hard and how easy that game is going to be for him. I do worry about MVG a little bit as to whether we are... It just feels like there's an air of vulnerability about him these days. He's not the player that I think everyone once feared over the years in his dominant period of winning world titles and loads of tournaments. He's still a fantastic player. He's still one of the best players in the world still. And on his day, I think it'll be hard to beat. And I think, again, he's another one. Similar to where I mentioned Michael Smith and Gerwyn Price, them type of players. Like, he could find himself deep in a tournament again and getting that confidence back and being a real force, and it'd be really, really good to see. But anyway, he plays one of the winner of them. I think he will win that still. And then he will probably play one of Brendan Dolan and probably likely Chris Landman. There's also Lok Yin Lee, who I don't know too much about, who plays Chris Landman in the first round, but they will play the winner. The winner of that will play Brendan Dolan. He's a tricky customer in his own right. Can always be one of these players that's a bit of a banana skin to some of the top players. But again, Michael will be looking at it and going, that's not a bad draw for me. Like, I think he'll look at that and think, I will fancy my chances of getting to the fourth round, basically, from that point onwards. And then on that other part of the quarter, you've got Gary Anderson and Ross Smith potentially waiting for him. Now, also there's Jeffrey de Graaf and there's the likes of Jim Williams as well in there as well. So, I mean, Jim Williams and Paolo de Breda take on the winner of that takes on Ross Smith, and then the winner of the Jeffrey de Graaf and Rashad Sweeten game takes on Gary Anderson. You'd like to think that Gary and Ross are playing well enough that they will win their game, and then you've got an absolute belter of a match potentially between Anderson and Smith to take on what will look like potentially Michael Van Gerwen in the following round. And in a way, it's a little bit of a shame that Anderson and Smith face each other that early doors, because they're two of my favourite players to watch. They genuinely are. I love watching them play. They hit loads of 180s. Just such entertaining two players, and to them to play one another, I think in the third round of this tournament just shows you how strong and how much depth I think this competition actually has. And it'll be a tough one to call, I think, but you don't really expect that Anderson Smith will have a big contest against one another. And then they would obviously take on Michael Van Gerwen, and then it will be a case of if they run out of steam a little bit by beating each other up, you don't know. Or will they get confidence from it and go, I've just beaten Gary's can go, I've beaten Ross, or Ross goes, I've just beaten Gary, I can take on anyone. It'll be very, very intriguing. But for me, I think the winner of this quarter will come from Gary, Ross, or Michael, because I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced by that bottom part of the quarter, but there is again an opportunity for someone to get to a quarter final. That I don't know if you would or wouldn't expect, but I think they've got a kind draw. But I'll go into that in a sec. So yeah, who wins between that lot? I think it's too tough to call. I really do. I think this is a really tough quarter. My gut feeling is Gary Anderson. I think Gary Anderson is the one who's playing the best out of all of them in this section of the draw. In fact, he's probably playing the best in this half of the draw. He's probably the third best player of this tournament. But he's obviously got a tough draw because of his seeding. He plays Ross Smith early. He plays potentially Michael Van Gerwen early. If he gets through them, he then plays one of Dave Chisnell, Gabriel Clements, Dimitri Van den Berg, Martin Schindler, or he could face a Callum Ritz, a William O'Connor, a Dylan Sleven, a Neil Zonovan, Ricky Evans. Who knows, right? I think there's an opportunity for someone like a Ricky Evans to go deep in this competition for the first time. If he wins his game against Gordon Mathers, which won't be that straightforward, but you expect Ricky will win that, he then takes on Dave Chisnell. Dave's a good player, but you always feel with Dave Chisnell, you can get at him. You can have an opportunity to beat him. I don't think Dave will let steamroller someone like Ricky, and I think that could be a really close game. And if he wins that, let's have it this right. Whoever wins the Dave Chisnell, Ricky Evans game, which I think that's what's going to happen in that second round, they play one of Gabriel Clements, Neil Zonneveld, or Robert Owen. I don't think any of them can fear any of them players that much. I actually think Neil Zonneveld could upset Gabriel Clements, and I think Neil Zonneveld could be the one of them two faces. I think Clements is in a bad period of form at the moment, which is surprising because he looked such an assured player at the World in recent years. But I think Clements could be under threat there a little bit, and I think one of Dave or Ricky will feel they've got a real good opportunity of getting into that fourth round, where on the other side you've got Dimitri Van den Berg and you've got Martin Schindler, and you also got likes of William O'Connor and Callum Ritz. And I think again, and there's Dylan Slevin and there's Romeo Gravbeck from Croatia. And I think again, that little section there's an opportunity for someone to go deep in the competition, but I don't know if they are. I don't know. I think Dimitri Van den Berg actually will be looking at this thinking there's a real opportunity to get in the quarterfinals. Certainly in the fourth round. I think it will be Van den Berg that gets through, but he doesn't always fill me with confidence that he's going to live up to that. But I think Van den Berg, I don't know. Van den Berg looks like the favourite to me to maybe get through that bit. I think Dave Chisnell and Ricky Evans are another two that could find a bit of form, and the crowd might be with them a little bit more. So yeah, I'm going to go with that actually. I think it will be Dave Chisnell or Ricky Evans that gets in to the quarterfinals against, I'm hoping it's Gary Anderson, but I couldn't say with confidence. I think Ross Smith and Michael Van Gerwen. I just don't fancy Van Gerwen at the moment, but it's a weird one. I think if Gary Anderson beats Ross Smith, I think Gary Anderson beats Michael Van Gerwen. If Ross Smith beats Gary Anderson, I think the Michael Van Gerwen game could be too tight to call. Oh God, it's awful. Right, let me go with it. I'm going to go with Gary Anderson. That's going to win that quarter. I think he beats. I think he gets. If he gets through that bit, I think he beats whatever's thrown at him at the bottom part of that quarter. There we are. So I think Gary Anderson is going to be the winner of quarter four. So it will be Gary Anderson versus Michael Smith in the other semi-final, and Luke Littler and Luke Humphries. So other potential. I mean, you've got to look at. As I say, I think it's very hard to look past Humphries, Littler, and Gary Anderson all being in the frame. I think, as I said, I think there's a real opportunity for Michael Smith to go deep in his tournament. I think there's a real opportunity for him to regain a bit more confidence and form. Same with maybe Gerwyn Price as well, for that matter. In terms of anyone outside that could kind of break themselves through, I think Van Veen could have a big tournament. I think he could find himself in a matchup potentially against Luke Littler in the quarterfinals, which I think will be exciting. But I also think there's an opportunity for like a Cameron Menzies or a Martin Lukeman to kind of go deep in the competition. I don't necessarily expect them to win it, but I think they've got a nice draw where I think they could get themselves into. They could get themselves into the fourth round, basically, which would be, I think, a good achievement for both players, and would help their chances off, I'd imagine, getting into that top 32 as well. So I think them two could come into it a little bit, but I don't think they'll go as far as winning it. I would probably, I'm just looking through the list of players. Ricky Evans is another one. As I mentioned earlier, I think Ricky Evans has got a nice draw as well. I'd imagine he'll beat Gordon Mathers. I think I think he'll give Dave Chisnell a good game and could beat Dave Chisnell. And then if he does, he's probably going to get one of Gabriel Clements, Robert Owen, or Niels Zonneveld in the third round. And again, he'll go. I probably fancy my chances in there. All of a sudden, he's in the fourth round himself, Ricky. So I think he's another one that could go deep. There's opportunities there for some players, but whether I think any of these are players are good enough to maybe win it, I'm not sure. I think Littler and Humphries, albeit like they're going to potentially meet each other in the semi-final, I think they're far too good, and I think Gary Anderson's playing at a level that's too good for most. They're going to be hard to beat. I think, as I said, I think the depth is so good in this tournament, but actually, to win it, I'm not convinced there is that many players you really hang your hat on and say, I think they could win this tournament. I still think it's one of the two Lukes or Gary for me. Maybe Michael Smith potentially if he can find some form. Maybe Michael Van Gerwen if he found some form. But I wouldn't have too many. Maybe Gerwyn Price if he found some form. Like, we're talking players who've been there, done it kind of scenario. But yeah, it should be cracking. I think, look, these are my thoughts. As I said, I'll recap again. I think it will be Luke Humphries winning quarter one. I think Luke Littler will win quarter two. I think Michael Smith will be the likely winner of quarter three, albeit I think there's a few players that could sneak in there. But I'm going to hang my hat on Michael Smith. And I think in quarter four, I think it'll be Gary Anderson. Again, there's a couple of players that could have a say in that. Early doors potentially, but I think they're the four, and then I think it will be a Luke Humphries Gary Anderson final where I think Luke Humphries wins it. But guys, thanks for watching. If you've got this far, please leave your comments on who you think is going to win each of the quarters, who you think is going to make the final, who you think is going to win yourself. Look, I've had a stab at just having a look at it myself and tried to make some sense of it, but yeah. Let me know what you guys think, and I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll try and do more of these type of videos about darts and maybe about other sports as well that I'm into. So please follow us and subscribe on YouTube. And I'll speak to you later.